This is an article that was in the Financial Times October 19th. It says rush by West to back Israel erodes developing country support for Ukraine. Diplomats warn that backing the Israeli assault on Gaza has poisoned the consensus against Russia's war in Ukraine. The article continues to read the reaction to the October 7th attack on Israel by Islamist militant group Hamas and to Israel's vow to hit back against Gaza has undone months of work to paint Moscow as a global pariah for breaching international law, they said, exposing the US, EU, and their allies to charges of hypocrisy. Just 4 weeks before the Hamas assault on Israel, leaders from the United States, European Union, and Western allies attended the G20 summit in New Delhi and asked developing nations to condemn Russia's attacks on Ukrainian civilians in order to uphold respect for the UN Charter and international law. Since last Sunday, since the attack, many of those officials told the Financial Times they have had the same argument read back at them in demands for condemnation of Israel's retaliatory assault on Gaza and of its decision to restrict water, electricity, and gas supplies there. This article is important because it talks about the hypocrisy in United States policy. These leaders of the global South, India, South Africa, other countries like that, are looking at the United States and the European sideways because it's saying you want us to condemn Putin for what he's doing in Ukraine because he's occupying Ukraine. He is assaulting Ukraine. That is the Ukrainians' homeland that they are now invading and taking their children. But when it comes to Israel and how they deal with the Palestinians in Gaza, you're saying that that behavior is okay. So they're saying the people who are occupying, they're saying that Putin is occupying Ukraine and you're saying that's wrong. But when the Israeli government occupies Gaza, that's okay. They're calling BS on it. But it's very important. I want you to listen to what President Biden said this evening in his Oval Office address. And look at how he tries to make the equivalency between the attacks on democracy instead of occupiers and the occupied.
It's sick. Hamas and Putin represent different threats, but they share this in common.
You hear that?
They both want to completely annihilate a neighboring democracy, completely annihilate it. Hamas' stated purpose for existing is the destruction of the state of Israel and the murder of Jewish people. Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. Hamas uses Palestinian civilians as human shields, and innocent Palestinian families are suffering greatly because of that.
Did you hear what he just said? He said that it's an attack on neighboring democracies, not an occupier or occupying force and the occupied people, not a nation against a nation, but against a neighboring democracy. Ukraine has its own government. Russia has its own government and they have their own military. Ukraine has their own military. Israel has their own military. The Palestinians do not have their own military, do not have their own government. Hamas is not the government, even though it acts like the government. But we have to remember that Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. Now, I condemn the attacks against the Israeli state on October 7th. I also condemn the conditions that were created by the Israeli government that made Hamas feel as if they needed to do these kinds of murderous attacks. I condemn all murder. I condemn all violence. I condemn all oppression. I condemn all acts of injustice, acts of depravity, acts of war. and all acts that violate humanity and human decency. This conflict, the conflict in Ukraine, the conflict in the Middle East, needs to stop immediately. Humanity, love, compassion, diplomacy must prevail. And our leaders must be wise enough and strong enough to make the difficult decisions that benefit humanity.